Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is Brittany Martinez, Republican strategist and executive director of Principles First. Brittany, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Really tragic news out of Utah yesterday. Conservative activist and Turning Point USA co-founder Charlie Kirk was assassinated during an event at Utah Valley University. To start off the conversation, how do you react to this news?
It's absolutely horrific. No one should ever be the victim of political violence. Political violence has no place in this country. I feel so terrible for his wife, for his kids. I've often been a critic of Kirk, but guess what? In this country, you have the First Amendment right to freedom of speech, and no one should be violent because they disagree with what you say. And I honestly, I'm pretty speechless. There's always threats, and on social media, people get nasty and there's trolls. But to see that happen, to see what many saw, myself included, the video on Twitter, and including the up close one, which I don't know if that was accurate or AI, because it was so horrific. It's a really sad state that our country is in right now.
And I think that you can see this heaviness if you turn on cable news, if you look on social media, that it doesn't matter if you agreed with Charlie Kirk or you thought that what he said was polarizing. He had such a profound impact on the Republican Party. Can you talk to us a little bit about that? What exactly did he mean to the conservative movement?
He did have a huge impact, especially when it came to young people. Turning Point USA and what he created with that over the last few years, especially. I mean, it was, he wasn't an overnight success by any means. I think he created Turning Point about about 12 years ago or so, but it truly still is such a meteoric rise what he was able to do and accomplish and have the ear of the president. He was only 31 years old, and he really put work in, and he's one of those people where, like you said, perhaps people find him polarizing, don't like what he had to say, but you cannot negate that he was a force to be reckoned with and had an impact on the Republican Party. Absolutely.
I'm curious where you think that the party and really the country goes next, because as you said, he had a wife, he had two young children, he was only 31 years old. I mean, how does the Republican Party move forward, and how does the country as a whole move forward? Because a lot of Democrats are disgusted, are shocked by this, saddened, have said there's no room in this country for political violence either.
I think in this moment, when people are frustrated and they're wanting to litigate his legacy and who he was and bring up controversial things he said, I think we will have plenty of time to talk about all of those things in this moment. I think we need to be human. I think we need to realize the severity of this situation, that a man was killed in front of all of our eyes in a way we've never quite seen political violence in the United States, where there are very, very horrific videos that look like something out of a horror movie, and take a beat. And if you are trying to be critical in this moment, I encourage you to lower the temperature. And I think that is what everybody needs to do, is to lower the temperature. I will say that I was a little disappointed with the president's remarks last night. I think we had great remarks by Governor Cox of Utah, who said we need to lower the temperature. And we had the president who gave his speech in the Oval Office and, of course, condemned these horrific acts, as one absolutely must, but then also called out radical leftists and said, essentially, it is your rhetoric that has led to this moment, when I think the president himself has said very, very atrocious things and is not helpful in lowering the temperature. And I think in this moment, I would have hoped that he would have risen to the occasion and not called out, especially when we still don't know so many facts. Other than Charlie Kirk is no longer with us and he was shot with some sort of firearm. That's truly all we know at this time. And I think it's irresponsible for us to be anything but calling out the condemnation of political violence against anyone, and also recognizing, I think it's disingenuous for us to not recognize that there have been that the temperature has been risen from both sides, not just one.
And I mean, we have seen in recent years alarming acts of political violence or attempts at political violence, from the shooting of Steve Scalise, the plot to kidnap Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, the assassination attempts, multiple, against President Trump, to the assassination of Minnesota House Speaker Melissa Hortman. Now this assassination, and I know I am missing some events there, but what do you make of, or how do we rather lower this temperature, and how do we stop this political violence?
I do think it starts at the top with the president. I do think that a lot of people look up to him and mimic his rhetoric. I do think it also is at the top with other high level, not just cabinet officials, admin officials, but senators, governors, Democrats and Republicans. Americans are looking to you in this moment to see how you are handling the situation, the language that you are using, and what you think it is and is not inappropriate to say in this time. And when you try to point the finger so callously, when again, we don't know, we can make assumptions and we would probably be right by who this shooter ends up being, the type, like we can profile and assume, and there's a good chance we're going to make a smart, educated assumption, but it's an assumption at this point and we do not know. And I think that we need to come together and lower the temperature by being humans. Today is the 24th anniversary of 9/11, and back then I remember we all had American flags on our cars right after, and it didn't matter who you were. You were our brother and sister in this country, and Bush went out and he threw that pitch at Yankee Stadium, and it was those moments that really brought us together. And we need to come together, and not just because of Charlie Kirk, but what he represents in this moment. That political violence is here, and it can't be. It just can't be.
I mean, to your point, it is the 24th anniversary of 9/11. And again, I remember September 12th, and I remember the days that followed. And what I don't remember is talking about politics at that time, but I do remember everyone in my neighborhood had an American flag on their car, in their yard. Everyone seemed to be a little nicer to each other around that time. There's still a lot we don't know right now. As you and I sit here, and things could change, but as you and I sit here, there's still a manhunt for the shooter. Details are still coming in. The investigation is still in its early stages. It is still ongoing. But what do you think his assassination means for the political landscape going forward?
I feel like in this moment, people are rightfully upset. They are looking for leadership. They're looking for someone to tell them how to feel, or to sort of legitimize their feelings. And I am hopeful that we can get to a place where we are more empathetic to our neighbors. I feel like we're sort of missing that empathy chip in a lot of ways. But in these first, not even 24 hours, and I don't mean to be hyperbolic here, I've still seen a lot of people out there sort of pointing the finger. And like I said, there will be plenty of time for us to litigate all of those things, especially when we have more information. But right now, this is a sorrowful moment in our history. This is a dark, dark day. And I hope that we're able to come together and to really put a stop to this rhetoric, and that this behavior and this shooter doesn't encourage more people to do that, because we also know, unfortunately, whenever there is this sort of shooting, that the next shooter is watching all the coverage, right? And I just hope that we can be responsible in the way that we are covering this, in the way that we're talking about this, and that our leaders can be as well.
And he was speaking at one of the stops on his American Comeback tour. And if you're unfamiliar with some of Charlie Kirk's work, attendees could participate in his Prove Me Wrong debates. He would sit there at a table, he would take questions from the audience, and he would have a back and forth dialogue, whether you agree with him or not. And this is how Turning Point built the event. Join Charlie Kirk on campus for a lively discussion of freedom in America. Don't agree with Charlie? Great. You go to the front of the line. And then the New York Post had a cover that said this. It was quoting Charlie Kirk. What we have to get back to is being able to have a reasonable disagreement where violence is not an option. Do you think we will get to a place where we can have these reasonable disagreements? Because it seems like more and more, it's just such a heated conversation. It's so charged politically. I mean, will we get to a point where we can have a dialogue amongst a Republican and a Democrat, people who don't agree on anything, and they can still sit at a table after their violence is not the answer and violence isn't even anywhere remotely near an option?
We must, we have to, for the betterment of all of us. I wish I had the answers as to how we get there. I think if someone did, it is a $1 trillion idea. I think we get there by being compassionate, by being mindful of the language that we use when we're talking about these things. And when others escalate, trying to de-escalate the conversation, or just, if not de-escalate, at least be as even-keeled as you can. We're humans. Sometimes we don't react that way. I'm really hopeful, all these young people that Charlie Kirk was able to tap into, young people in general, when we're talking about college campuses and stuff, though we've seen a trend towards Republicans, which is actually pretty insane because it's never that way. I think we've also seen a trend of young Americans who don't like politics, who think that it's extreme, who thinks every time it's a fight, and don't even want to get into debates or discussions because they think it's volatile. And we need to get back to basics and remind folks that it is okay to disagree with people, and that does not make them inherently evil just because they don't see the world the way that you do.
And when Governor Gavin Newsom, a Democrat, started his podcast, one of his first guests, or his very first guest, I don't know which one it is, was Charlie Kirk. And he sat there and he said, my son, who's a teenager, wanted to stay home from school because he's such a fan of you. And a Democrat is saying that to Charlie Kirk. And they had a conversation back and forth. They disagreed on a lot. But President Trump reportedly credited Charlie Kirk with shoring up that youth vote that contributed to his win in 2024. So as we sit here today, I mean, what do you think his legacy on this movement and the party is?
Yeah, I remember that interview, and I remember thinking, what is Newsom doing? And that was just a few short months ago, and I can't believe we're in this moment. And I think, Brittany, you and I actually talked about that interview back then, and I can't believe in this moment we're having this really horrific conversation about the assassination of someone in our country. And I think that, especially conservatives, they're incredibly upset. Understandably, they should be, by what's happened. We should all be incredibly upset by what's happened. And I think that he will have a lasting legacy. Turning Point will continue and be strong. And I think that, sadly, that of course it's coming to this, but I can see them having sort of a surge maybe in membership, and not that we're in need of a surge in membership. They have plenty of young folks who are very engaged, but what I mean is that I think this will sort of be a rallying cry to some people. And I'm just really sad for him and his family, and that this is where we are. And in this whole interview, I apologize if I assume that I'm rambling at all, but it's how do we talk about this, right, in a very thoughtful, intentional way? And I do think that his legacy will continue to have an impact for years to come, and Turning Point will continue to exist, and it exists because of him.
I mean, I think that's a really good point. I mean, how do we talk about this in a conversation in an impactful, intentional way? Because I mean, the news was so shocking, and then to see it play out on social media, I mean, it was horrific. I think there's no words to describe it. And aside from shocking, clearly I'm shocked because I'm not one to be at a loss for words. And what we saw in the past less than 24 hours, I mean, it's just, I can't even wrap my mind around it. But I'm grateful for the conversation. And I think this is a reminder for everyone to turn the temperature down. Brittany Martinez, thank you so much for joining me.